The question I get from most new teachers is, oh my God, I've got to make lesson plans. How do I do that? What is a scheme of work? So I've made a video about how to do a scheme of work. This video is about making lesson plans for teachers. I'm a drama teacher, and so it is more based on drama, but it is very good for anyone who wants to know how to do a lesson plan. You can always adapt it for your own subject. What is a lesson plan? Well, basically, a lesson plan assists with the structure and the timing of your lesson. You've got your scheme of work, you know the topics, you know the activities that you're going to do, the learning outcomes, the lesson objectives. You've even listed resources in your scheme of work. But this is fine-tuning it for lesson to lesson. A lesson plan is basically like a how-to that you write to yourself, a plan of how the lesson is going to go. It's very much like a recipe. It is like if you're baking something and you're winging it, the chances are you're going to do well or not do well. You might overcook, it might come out burnt. Well, the same thing goes for teaching. You can have a really good idea in your head about how to create an ideal lesson, but when you put it on paper and you think it out and you make it into a plan, that idea becomes so much more fine-tuned. You can keep all your lesson plans and make a hard copy. You can keep that hard copy on your desk with a pen, just make a note each and every time that you've completed any of the activities. You can put a note, you can put ticks on it. I love ticking things off on my hard copy. And then I file everything so that if in the future I need to use that lesson plan again, I know where to find it. So you can use it for reference. Your next term, you might want to use the same template as your previous term. Your institution or school may have a particular template that they want you to use. If you ever change school and the template has to change, you can always use your saved files by copy pasting into the relevant boxes what you need to use. So what goes into the lesson plan? What are its contents? The title of the last lesson is always useful to have in your lesson plan so that you've got a sense of context, and your next lesson title. So that could be week 1, week 2, the topic. It could be lesson 1, lesson 2. It could be the title of the topic with some sort of referencing with a date perhaps, but it doesn't need to be in detail. It just needs to be there so that you know, oh yeah, I'm on my 2nd lesson of this topic, or I'm on my 14th lesson of this topic. The activities are the most important part of lesson planning because this is where you get more in depth. How many activities you've got, the timing of each activity. If you're teaching and you're really into the activities and so are the learners and you're not keeping an eye on a clock, you may never reach the end of your class because the bell will go and you'll be like, oops, out of time. You want to put the types of activities down, whether they're group activities, working in pairs, whether they're teacher-led, whether they're student-led. Maybe these are the types of activities that are for different types of learners, such as a kinesthetic active activity, and then something that's more audio, visual, for different types of learners to be engaged. And then the purpose, well, that's the lesson objective plus the activity objective. So you're going to know exactly why you're doing what you're doing. When you reach that objective, when you meet it, you can move on to the next activity. It's a 1-page document that you can see at a glance. Definitely like looking at a recipe while you're baking. You're teaching and you're checking this document. At the top, you want your objectives and your learning outcomes. It's always really nice to introduce your class to the learning outcomes at the beginning of the lesson. In this class, we're going to learn how to do this. And you can write that on the board, and then they know, okay, we are going to reach the end of the lesson when we've learned this. So that nobody will get stuck in any of the activities and dwell inside them, when you can move on and say, look, we're going to do the next activity now, which is going to teach you this. Another very, very important aspect of the lesson plan is listing out your resources. This is a basic list of all the things that you need for each particular lesson. It could be the worksheets, the number of worksheets that you need. If they're working in pairs, do you need to print one each or do you need one between two? If you know how many students are in your class, then you'll know exactly that number when they're working in pairs, when they're working in groups, how long you will need for each activity when you know how many are in your class. What you need for each of those lessons is basically the types of things, the objects, glue, scissors, paper, pens, coloring pencils, anything that might go into it. For drama, what props do you need? What items are you going to be using? Because you may have 6 lessons in one day and you won't have time in between each class to go and get those items. So you want to check at the beginning of the day, first thing in the morning, have I got all my resources for my lessons? Where's my lists? The lists should be on the lesson plan itself. The other thing that is important are the special education needs. Now, some students are working at a higher level and some are not working at such a high level and may be distracted or distracting others. If you've got, say, for an example, ADHD students in your class and they are not going to sit down and pay attention to some explaining that you're doing, do you have something for them to do when they're itching to get started? I tend to have things like coloring worksheets that are related to the topic that they can get on with. They are listening, they just need something to do while they're listening. If you've got learners whose mother tongue is of a different language, do you have any vocabulary cards? Do you have any worksheets that they could work on? Do you have any picture cards? Anything that you may need so that you've got some other activity that you can have going on the side as and when you need it throughout the lesson. Now, the scheme of work, which we went into in another video, it will tell you the number of lessons, what are the topics, the assessments, and the learning curve for those lesson objectives, which is laid out from class to class. So in term 3 of May 2014, we can see that the learning activities has got a little more detail. We're going to begin with a 5-minute starter, recapping from last week. We're going to look at the roles of villains and heroes in the modern era. I've capped both of those items to be 5 minutes, and I always have a clock on the wall. I don't use my phone in my class, so I don't have access to a clock on a phone. And if I'm trying to look at a tiny clock on my laptop, I might not pay attention to my class, so I tend to put a nice big clock on the wall. 5 minutes is up, let's move on. The development of the lesson is 35 minutes, and we're looking at basically 2 things. The Batman hero and the people of Gotham, we're creating a chorus, and we're doing this in groups. So we're following a text that I have.
There's some special educational needs. I've got listing favorite heroes as one of them and identifying villains and heroes from pictures of characters as another. This way, at least, I am aware of their progress and comprehension of the topic, even if they are not able to follow or comprehend the lessons so well. Is this character the good character or the bad one? Is it the villain or the hero? If they can do that, then I'm happy that they are progressing. Now, once we have done the main body of the lesson, we have the plenary to the lesson. Have we met the objective? The hero in ancient Greek theatre. Well, we take a look at a script from Sophocles on Electra.
They are going to have a chance to rewrite that script as a group, and then they're going to read it out to the rest of the class. The assessment opportunities are listed on the lesson plan. We could do choral speaking at a grade 4 level. We could do devising drama at a grade 1 level. My resources are at the bottom. Then there's optional homework. And then what I'm going to review next week when I come back. So in my next lesson plan, this is the first thing I'm going to do, is review what I've set as an optional homework or a future discussion. So how do we plan the learning flow? Well, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of your learners. What activities that we are going to use, what are we going to do, which order or sequencing of those activities is going to work the best. This goes into your lesson plan. The number of learners will affect those activities. So like I said before, if you've got pairs, do you have an even number of students in the class? If not, is there going to be one group of 3? Is that okay for that type of activity? If you're working in groups of 4 or 5, how many groups will that become? And if those groups are going to do something at the end of the activity, like perform or demonstrate their work, do you have enough time for that, for 4 or 5 groups or groups of 4 or 5 people? Are your activities teacher-led? Are they student-led? You should plan a sort of flow. I tend to start with teacher-led and lead it into student-led and then come back to teacher-led in most of my lessons. And then what type of assessments are we working towards? Are we looking at some demonstration of the work? Is it a written exam? Is it some class performance, or is it a school production? When you get to drama teaching, you also can utilize school productions as a form of assessment because everybody is working as a team on every item of the school production. How do you measure the right amount of resources? Well, if your groups are working in pairs, do you need one worksheet for the pair or do you need one each? Are they writing on those? Do you need a fresh set for each class, or are they recyclable and reusable for each class? Do they hand them back and you give them back? These are things that are the more detailed, that goes into the actual learning plan document. Your lesson plan has these types of things that you need to think about to create the learning flow. Here is a scheme of work from September 2014. We've entered a new academic year. It is still called Class 8A, but this is actually a different class to the previous one. We are looking at each week learning how to act and direct as basically for modern plays. We're looking into a learning flow that has outcomes which are simple for the first week of a new academic year with a new year group who haven't reached the level of what I would consider year 8 yet. So it's simple, but it's effective. We're going to start with pair work in the first week and then pair work in the second week. The difference is in the first week, we're just identifying which emotions we want to highlight for a particular type of script. We're using monologues, so we're going to have pairs of students, one actor, one director per pair. When they get to swap over, they get to see both sides. In the next week, we're working more with how to create intensity in the speech, how to play up or play down those emotions to get the best effect. They will stick to the same pairs as the previous group. As you can see, my topic, my sessions, my learning outcomes, my activities, and my resources are listed. Out of these, it's the learning activities that is going to be more in depth in the lesson plan. Here is the lesson plan for the first week of that scheme of work. As you can see, the scheme of work just listed the activities, but now the activities have numbers beside them. That's the same list in the scheme of work, but below it is the recipe, getting into pairs, A and B, and then they're going to spend 10 minutes analyzing the script, 10 minutes listing the emotions, 10 minutes applying the emotions to the script as actor or director, and then 10 minutes exchanging roles. So they're going to have a go at it, and they may get to perform in class. We'll have a question feedback at the end, and we're probably performing in the next class. Assessment opportunities are there for acting, directing, or for the production. We've got resources listed. Now, if I don't have my resources ready, I'm going to be a stressed teacher. And a stressed teacher is a cranky teacher. So I want to make sure these are there before my class starts. I didn't have any special education needs in this particular class, but if I did have, I would list them on the right-hand side. It's very simple. It's not too detailed. I like to keep it simple because for me, I know the activity. I don't need a full description of how it works. What I really need is the timing. If I don't list the timing for each activity, I will go over time and I won't be satisfied with my teaching as a result. Here we can see the resources for that lesson. I did not have the same monologue for each group. Each pair was given a random monologue from either Batman, Superman, Sweet Tooth, the Penguin, or Vicky Vale. And these monologues I found from a YouTube channel, and I listened to the performance and I wrote the script out. I did so much research on trying to get the right value for their educational need in this particular type of lesson because I wanted it to be fun and learn very essential things in a very fun way. The monologues I selected were very short so that they could spend 10 minutes on each activity without going over time. And therefore the resources become the most time-consuming part of planning lessons. Listing it on a lesson plan is not as time-consuming as resourcing all your items that you're going to use. And this was a topic that I had taught in a different way before, but these monologues, I spent many hours listening to a performance to get this dialogue, and the dialogue was only used for educational purposes. It was a parody of the original characters. In the following two lessons, we looked at duologues. So there were two actors in each group and one director. So there were groups of three. So we're building on the previous learning. Here we have an example of the things that I needed to get ready for the class. I've got playing cards, which were used for intensity levels. The emotion chart, because a vocabulary for emotion is still something that can be explored. We can see hundreds of emotions and be able to use the right word for each. Here are two samples of the script, which were short monologues that I typed up myself, printed it way in advance of the lesson, and made sure that I had enough copies for everybody in the class. The learning outcomes and the learning objectives are very important. You have to have the right expectation for their age. You can't expect the students who are young to understand things like emotional intensity, but in a secondary class, that's fine. It's okay, and it's also very rewarding to know that you can measure emotions and use the right words for the emotions in a group that is, say, 12, 13, 14. Cross-curricular education becomes crucial when you're looking at your learning outcomes. I've gone over this in the previous video where my scheme of work talks quite a bit more elaborately on cross-curricular topics and the value of those objectives. Where do they go? What are they for? Is it just for your subject, or would they cover other things? Do the objectives increase their potential in communication skills? Do the value of those objectives work well with other subjects? When you open your lesson, you're going to start by explaining the objective of that lesson, making sure that it is clear. And then once they understand what the objective is, you can enhance that understanding by discussing the value of that objective. Very short, but very concisely. At least they will be interested in the lesson once it starts. You've got your special education needs, and you need to be sure that your objectives for the special education needs are met as well. How do you lay out your lesson plan? Well, basically you can do vertical or horizontal. I prefer to use a template. Sometimes I write it on just a blank piece of paper, but it looks like a shopping list of things to do. I would prefer things to be in boxes and on a table. That's my preference. What is the information that is required? Make sure that the required information is there, but then you can add any other information that you want to afterwards. So if you haven't got a box for where your cross-curricular activities would lead to, you can add that in. If you need a box to cover equipment, maybe that's another thing. You will need, say, 24 chairs for this lesson, or you'll need to have all the chairs away. Those are other things that you might want to put on the lesson plan. Do you need to use a smart board? Are you using the floor? Do you want everyone to take off their shoes before the lesson starts? These are the sorts of things that you can put on your lesson plan, because if you've got multiple year groups that you're teaching, you may need to remember that, oh, year 6 can't wear shoes for this lesson, but year 8 is going to wear their shoes. Year 7 is going to lie down on the floor, so I'm not going to have any shoes in this room this term, and things like that. I also created a monthly planner because there were a number of year groups from 1 to 9, and I was needing to just sort of have something on the wall behind me where I could remember which classes I had on any particular day. You can see Tuesdays were quite busy, and I was very pleased to have a public holiday on one of those Tuesdays, whereas Fridays were not busy at all. Some days you're running around like a blue-arsed fly, and on other days you're sitting making use of the time creating more lesson plans for the next following week. Once I'd got into creating the full page of a lesson plan, I also started doing daily planners where I could just tick from day to day. If I'm in the middle of teaching one class, I can see the next class is going to need this, and this. Then I've got it all on one page and I don't have to flick through my file to find the right year group. So that's another idea. With each lesson being 1 hour, I had 1 hour of class 4A, and then straight afterwards class 7C, and then an hour's break where I could get my things ready for my 9A class. But if you can see on another daily planner, I didn't have any breaks. It was just back to back. So I needed all my resources, and I needed to know that these were the order of the classes that I was going to be teaching in. I left a column where I could make notes, and that was really useful. I made notes on whether a class came back late from assembly and started late. I made notes that there was the fire drill in the middle of this lesson, so we had to break. I made notes that somebody forgot something, so next week I'm going to remind them, things like that, and I filed them in a daily planner file. That's just an idea. It's not essential and it's not necessary, but when you have lots of different classes, you may find that useful. This is a bit more close-up of a lesson plan on a daily planner. Each activity is listed with the timing, except that all I've got are the activities and not the rest of the information that goes into a lesson plan. But it was very useful. Tick, 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 time, good. That was basically all I needed. The next topic that we're going to cover in my next video for teachers is how to do drama assessments. I would not generalize it for assessments for all teachers, but any teacher of any other subject will find this useful, although it is geared towards drama teachers in particular. I really hope this helped. If you've got any questions, please post them in the comments section below. Do remember to like, subscribe, share to this channel. A lot of work goes into helping you, and we thoroughly enjoy it. This is our passion. Help us, help you, help us, help you. Let's create the cycle of helpfulness. Thank you so much. Bye.